On today's episode of SaaSOps Live virtual event, there's 77 subscribers. That is the power of the internet.
But I wasn't, whatever he said, I agree. I don't know.
While I deal with the joys of working from home and dealing with a cat who's now going to play with my headphones. So welcome to Solve episode 22. Would you believe it? 22 of these recorded episodes of Solve. Solve stands for SaaSOps Live virtual event. We always like SaaSOps. It is our life. This is a virtual event. That's why it's called Solve. And today, with my collection of friends and colleagues, some new faces, some old faces, we are going to talk about our first usage of SaaS, software as a service applications. When did we first become aware of them? How has the development of an expansion of our usage of SaaS grown over the last few years? It might not be even a few years, it could be a lot longer, decades maybe. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me on this Friday afternoon. It is a bank holiday weekend for the UK. So I think thank my UK colleagues for joining us. But let's start with the dictionary or the Wikipedia definition of software as a service. It is a software licensing and delivery model in which software is licensed on a subscription basis and is centrally hosted. It is sometimes referred to as on-demand software and was formerly referenced to as software plus services by Microsoft. So that's the sort of the definition, a subscription model that is centrally hosted. So who has been aware of SaaS for more than 5 years? Yeah, everybody. How about 10 years? Yeah, 15 plus years? Yes.
That was 2006.
Yeah, so here we have a SaaS cat. What, while I deal with the joys of working from home and dealing with a cat who's now going to play with my headphones.
Centrally hosted.
So it's a centrally hosted cat. Yes, here's a subscription-based model. What was who can remember their first being aware of software as a service applications?
Interesting.
Even if you didn't know them by that name.
Yeah, I didn't know it by that name, but as you posed this question in our chat, I was watching the conversation, that was the part that I gravitated more towards, is I knew specifically about the hosting part, not per se the SaaS part. That was kind of the first I ever bumped into. We were on Google, but I wasn't managing it.
Die erzählen mir jetzt alle, wie sie zuerst mal sagen.
Well, I wasn't, whatever he said, I agree. I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, so it wasn't like we were on Google. I wasn't managing it. It was still early days. The place where I was at, I constantly was seeing the people who were managing it. They were making tools to do additional stuff based on whatever Google allowed. So they were doing all these internal tools and building everything. So it didn't seem to me like that big cloud cool, like, wow, that's amazing. This is so cool. The concept's there. So I wasn't immediately jumping on the bandwagon of everybody chucking out the things and trying to classify, did this qualify at all of that. While working that job, I did become aware of Dropbox, and I went crazy abusing every promo they could to get every bit of storage I could out of them. So that was really like the first true tool that I used, aware of the full concept, but just simply becoming aware of the starter idea was a weird space with Google technically. You okay there, Colin?
I shouldn't have worn my headphones because my cat now wants to play with the cord. So if I disappear, I have to go and get a Band-Aid to get rid of the scratches on my face. That's where I've gone.
I
guess,
was gonna say, I think many people, their first interaction with SaaS is probably gonna be Google.
yeah, Google and Box in my case.
And Dropbox was one of my earliest experiences with SaaS. I didn't realize that Box had been around that long.
Pretty
No,
close
they
to the
have-
same time. I think they came second after Dropbox.
Did they come out of a different
different.
market?
They focus on the business market. Box was very enterprise focused.
Oh, and Dropbox was very personal for a long
Correct.
time.
Yep.
Correct.
That
Yep.
makes sense.
Yeah, I remember
Box
there
was
being
started in
legalities.
2005.
Yeah.
Okay.
2005 for Box, 2008 for, I think it was 2008 for Dropbox, but I can look that up again. Yep, 2008. And then Gmail, of course, was 2004.
So I think for a lot of people, probably Gmail is going to be one of those big applications that they would have been aware of, because obviously before then everybody was doing POP or IMAP with whoever their internet service provider was. And obviously there was Hotmail, there was a load of other web-based mail applications that you could get or either get for free or pay for, Yahoo Mail. I see in the chat, we're also talking about, there's been a question of, does this include personal applications? And I know in the Better IT Slack channel where I'd posed this question, people had said, had raised the question of, would something like Pandora count as a SaaS application? Because I think they were one of the first big music providers to move away from, streaming our music in the browser, as opposed to us having to acquire either legally or illegally, which was very popular at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, MP3s and hosting them and storing them ourselves.
Raise your hand if you've never illegally acquired an MP3. Never? Not once? I don't believe that, Jesse.
Well, this is being recorded, so.
Oh, yes. Well, then.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
everybody has at some point, like, received a file from someone, like, whatever it is. Like, there's lots of ways to illegally acquire audio.
You're going to illegally acquire the recording of this episode.
Yes, in theory you could. But I mean, like, I was a
mixtapes
minor.
count?
The last time I like downloaded miscellaneous music files off the internet was when I was a minor. So you can't charge me for that now. Ha, ha, ha.
Unless there's no statute of limitations for that crime.
I don't even have evidence that I did it. Those computers are long gone.
Yes. Yeah. Local storage, I think, is a thing
All
of the
you have
past
are
for a lot
my
of us.
stories about LimeWire.
What is Napster?
Yes.
Does Napster qualify as SaaS? It was a subscription base, right?
Wasn't centrally hosted.
Not originally.
No, it was a peer-to-peer, wasn't it?
It became subscription later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't
Unless a
Napster
college
acquired?
campus counts, it wasn't centrally hosted.
From a technical standpoint, the definition of SaaS, Colin, I don't know if you ever actually read that, is that it requires a subscription.
Yeah. I read the definition. It is software is licensed on a subscription basis and is centrally hosted. So, it can either be browser based. It could use an application. I think that's a bit of a gray area. Obviously, there's a lot of these SaaS based applications do have a physical installed application available as an option. So we've talked about sort of, I guess, the consumer side, Gmail, Pandora, some other things. What about business applications? What was the sort of the year where people remember starting to see business applications that were SaaS, pure SaaS? Obviously, there's Salesforce, and they're no software. They're no software, which I think is from like 2002. Was one of the big advertising campaigns, and they went from being, I think, a small startup at the time, and beating out that's the European companies. It's Cybele, it was Oracle, and Cybele. What's the other one? The name escapes me at the moment, but some of those large mainframe type operating system, database companies went to Salesforce was one of the standouts for
I was gonna
providing
say, I
the
think
service.
Salesforce is considered one of the earliest examples of B2B SaaS.
Yeah, Salesforce, I was actually looking this up, apparently got their SaaS chops from buying Concur, which is kind of universally recognized as the first ever proper SaaS product.
Is it universally recognized?
According to
Considering
multiple
I never
websites
knew
I'm
that.
seeing it on. Depends how you define universally recognized, I suppose.
Yeah. Which universe? Marvel,
A
DC.
multiverse.
That doesn't surprise me because well, and now SAP owns Concur.
Yep.
I didn't realize that Salesforce had it, actually.
Other than Google, I think the first kind of enterprise stuff that I was seeing in that sort of space would have been backup stuff.
Backup like
Code 42.
right, yeah.
Yeah, and what they were doing, even though when we first were exposed to it, there was an on-prem box having some role in it, it still was centrally hosted, and they had all the software you were paying for to have the world worth of computers hand it to your box on-prem, which then they started offering, when it got cheap enough, data centers of their own.
My earliest introduction to B2B SaaS would have been when I went to college, because we had Google Apps for Education, and we really used them. Although, does anybody remember Prezi?
Yeah. I go back to it every now and then just to be like, I hate doing these.
I mean, I actually really liked Prezi. I think they fell out of fashion because I think they're kitschy, right? Like they're.
Yeah.
Was that the floating presentation where you would float above the presentation, it would then zoom over to something else?
Yeah, it would like zoom over
around,
different stuff, and like they had all these different like templates that like had different kind of designs based on the type of presentation you were giving. And
was it Flash-based to start with, and could that have been a core of why it died?
I know it is not Flash-based.
They're still around.
I know it's not Flash-based anymore, but I wonder if it was at the beginning, and that's why there was a point.
I mean, wasn't everything?
It was for sure. I know it because I had to deal with it on some Chromebooks for some reason.
Yeah.
Rose, you're right, by the way. It was SAP, not Salesforce. Apologize.
Right. Yeah. Well done.
Misread that.
I mean, mentioning Salesforce for Education, that was probably the first. Not Salesforce for Education. Google for Education. That was probably the first time I saw any SaaS-based product, and we just won a huge deal with a university in the UK to migrate their email from Novell GroupWise to Microsoft Exchange. It was a $100,000, probably £200,000 deal,
right?
And we did the project, and then the guy that won that deal was then working with another university, and they were going Google. And they were one of the first universities over in Europe to go Google. And he sent an email around to the entire company just saying that migration and the professional services of moving to an email system where you build the email system, you build servers, you sell the servers, the services, the whole thing is dead. And we just, as a person in that space, you kind of look at it and go, right, I need to pivot and I need to do something else. And so I did.
What year was that?
I was probably 2007, 2008, something like that.
That's very good to be able to see the writing on the wall for hosted exchange.
I mean, I think that would be a pretty
on-premise hosted
incredible
exchange
experience, though, right? Like if you work for an organization that migrates people to server-based email systems, and you're used to having to stand up the entire thing in order to deliver on that product, and then you go and do a Google migration.
Oh yeah,
Or like all you're doing
yeah.
is like signing up, creating accounts, doing a little bit of configuring, and then like pushing the data in there. Like I can imagine that would be a pretty stark difference.
It was, but then when you have a full team of people who are experienced and experts in building servers and NAS boxes and clusters and all this kind of stuff, you know, the organization has to either dramatically change or you create a new organization. And I jumped ship because I'm you know, moving an organization that is doing that and used to that is extremely difficult. Moving people and mindsets is really hard. So just move yourself to another organization and start again. Create a tool that moves people to Google, and yeah, the rest is as I say, history.
Like,
Yeah. Obviously, having Google for Education in, you know, K-12 and in universities has really made it just part of every new employee's way of working. You know, they are used to accessing things in a browser. They are not expecting that, you know, you need a fat client to, you know, be installed on your laptop, and you need to connect to the VPN to, you know, receive your email. And that practice still does happen. I remember just 3 or 4 years ago, there was a very, very, very large internet service provider that we get services from. I was on a call with our customer service manager, and he said, "Oh, I'll send you the file." And he said, "Oh no, I can't send you the file at the moment." This was a telephone call, you know, as opposed to a video call meeting that we were having, because that's how they operated. And he was like, "Oh, I'll send you this file." He said, "Oh no, I can't send you the file because I can't connect to the VPN, and I need to connect to the VPN for my you know, Microsoft Exchange, you know, client to sync in and get mail from our internally hosted Exchange servers." And I thought to myself, you know, even in 2016, that's such an old, outdated way of working. But it's that practice is still there and probably still in use. And this is one of the things I was thinking about the other day is for us as SaaSOps professionals, we just take it for granted that everything's in the browser and everything is available everywhere on any device. But for a lot of people, they're still going through that journey. And that's why I thought it would be interesting to look back at our journey before we took it for granted. You know, and we were considering, you know, using these applications and the pros and cons, and our first experience with them.
Are we there, or at what point, with all the big major hacks that have happened in the news and the stuff that seems to go on more and more now, are we there where the whole security through obscurity comes back to where doing an on-prem box that has to be VPN'd into suddenly becomes so hard and annoying to do that you're now secure through obscurity because nobody else does that anymore?
Yes, yeah, and if you disconnect from the internet at 6 o'clock on a Friday, reconnect on Monday, you're secure. Yeah,
because we are still seeing tons and tons and tons of security problems relating to on-premise networks.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't think we're there yet. I think if you give it a few years, Randy, we may actually get to that point.
But then you're in a situation where you basically run floppy disks on your atom bombs.
They still make magnetic tapes with tons of terabytes of storage. So, yeah, we can do this.
Yeah, but I think it's accepted by all companies that SaaS is the way to go, and they've all adopted a large number of SaaS. So,
yeah.
So we can't say that we're there. It's you know, very few people still refuse to go SaaS. I don't think you find many companies that refuse to go SaaS. Well, maybe some smaller.
I was having a conversation with Colin yesterday, actually, where I posed this question to him. If the head of a technology for a company came to you and said, "There is no SaaS in our organization," would you believe them?
For a larger company, any company, I wouldn't. Like anything over 100 people, I wouldn't. Maybe you'll find some small companies with backward thinking owners or
And,
reluctant
and,
owner.
and I think that if they don't, as an organization, use any SaaS-based products, their users will be
Right, their
consuming more
employees
SaaS.
probably are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I might believe
You don't
them.
use Dropbox, your team will.
I might believe them, but I will know that they're not doing their job. Like
Right.
it's an immediate red flag to me that you're not on top of things.
To be
And
fair,
then-
Colin's response was like, I don't think, like, have you heard of shadow IT? Because like,
Yep,
it's not
Exactly.
possible.
And it would be a huge red flag to me. It wouldn't just be just kind of a generic judging like, okay, he's not great at his job. I would actually truly have massive issues with whoever that is, the company, because if they're not thinking about it, they're not really observing the world and everything that's going on. And that shadow IT is so massively dangerous in an environment that big, that's clueless to even the tiniest, and acknowledging that, oh, it must be out there, but we don't officially condone it. That's a different stance than, nope, there's nothing.
I think we have
I've
a
had-
long way to go until we get to the point where everything is SaaS. Because I just had this argument with multiple people internally about this, and they were like, "Well, we need this software, and this industry hasn't built anything out for SaaS, and it's better to do it on-prem, so we're going to host it on-prem." I'm like,
I don't, I never
no.
believe people when they tell me that.
there are
This is
other
the only
options.
thing. I'm like, yes, there are other things.
Yeah.
Nobody is
Also,
so
I'm not running those
special.
servers, so tough.
Yeah.
I've had conversation with a large company where they said, we want to move away from public SaaS and host everything in our own private cloud on AWS, still as a SaaS solution, but
Mhm.
hosted by them. And that's one way to
If
overcome.
it's self-hosted,
That's not
it's
SaaS.
still SaaS. I don't think that's SaaS.
No, they're
It's
saying,
really
let's
hard.
take your commercial SaaS solution, but hosted
Right,
on our
and
own
self-host.
instance.
The thing about that is so part of the reason to use SaaS, right, is that centrally hosted piece, because it means that, and I guess you're right, the only organization who might benefit from doing that would be a very large one.
Correct.
Because the whole point is that we're benefiting from Google's engineers, we're benefiting from organizations that have much more expertise in certain things than we do. We don't have to maintain our own team of engineers. We don't have to maintain our own team of like product and development and all that kind of stuff just to make sure that people stay working. And our uptime is 99.9, sometimes 999%, right? And so like, and when it's not, like we have ways to get that back.
No, I agree with you. I was referring
Yeah.
to 100,000 employee plus.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, when I worked at Verizon,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but
I'm
but
sure
yeah,
it's
no, when I worked
public
at Verizon,
knowledge.
there were definitely things that I was like, they're hosting their own version of this. There's no way.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it makes sense for them to do that because they have over 100,000 employees easily.
Yeah, and they would have the funds and the support of a good security team. You know, the benefit of getting a SaaS application from somebody like Google. I remember seeing a couple of years ago the top 500 cybersecurity professionals, I think, work for Google. So, you know, if you're gonna want to use a platform, you're going to want it to be secure. So you're not going to be able to hire that number of highly skilled people yourself. So pay somebody else to use their services. I think that's obviously that's one of the obvious benefits of SaaS. Henry, I'm interested in your background. So, like, I know everybody else's background. I didn't know if you wanted to do an introduction. I know you've been on some of the other calls. I would love to know your history and interests, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. Again, yeah. Thanks again for having me here. I used to be an IBM business partner, and we used to help customer use IBM collaborative solution like Lotus Notes and Portal. And it was a good business till IBM stopped being competitive and all our clients moved to either Google or Microsoft. And so reluctantly, we thought we can stay on the IBM model and make money by being the last people there. But we made the transition to become a Google partner, and we start helping clients migrate their application on the Google Cloud, rebuilding application on the Google Cloud. And that was fun and exciting. It was nice to be part of a winning team again.
Excellent.
And then we decided that building application, it's nice business as a consulting company, but it's expensive. Every time you build an app, costs 50, 60, 100,000. So we decided to build our own SaaS product on the Google platform, and it is a no-code application platform where people can build their own app, just like Lotus Note used to be, or Google App Maker, but no code. And so we've been doing that the last 4 or 5 years. So I downsized my consulting business and I converted to a SaaS company.
Excellent. You're on the perfect virtual show to discuss all that. And it's interesting that you're talking about applications and GCP, because obviously I know that I am very focused around the collaboration aspect, the email, calendar, video conferencing, document sharing. But there is, obviously this whole move and migration of internally hosted applications, porting them, lifting them, or co-hosting them locally, and then in the cloud for a lot of organizations.
No, but we're getting, you still have some reluctance among larger company to use a small SaaS company.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what I mentioned. We are porting our product on AWS for a private instance for a large client. But today, our customers are all running on a multi-tenant solution on the Google Cloud. And it works, you do have some reluctance, but the Google Cloud provides a lot of security. We just leverage all the security feature that Google has, and our platform really allow people to monitor and manage who can access their data. So we're not getting any pushback anymore.
That's good. Yeah, I think with
kind of running a hybrid solution of on-prem versus self-hosted on Google, with the BigQuery exports as a very simple example, where you export all your logs into BigQuery to keep them safe there. So that we have some hybrid solution available for us anyway.
Just as a tie back to last week too, as Rose had talked about, benefiting from and different things that we benefit from, that security expertise, whatnot. The other part is we benefit from the innovations, whether they be engineering or social, because the large companies like Google are doing the green solutions. And Microsoft, trying to figure out the new green stuff. So they're putting the money into it. And as much as you may want to be socially progressive as a company, dumping the money into hosting your own stuff in a green solution and shoving it in a tank and shoving it underwater for cooling and all that, you're not going to do that on your own. So the big company is doing that and then creating that new standard and having that become just the boxes you happen to be using at AWS are in a completely solar powered data center in the middle of Arizona. Fabulous. You're now a green company doing the right thing socially. And all that technical innovation too, super fast speeds, low power usage. Cool.
Yeah. I remember when data centers all used to be cool, and then they became hot, and you would have hot data centers. You'd have the cold on the hot side.
Yeah. And having to, put on the winter jackets and everything, just like if you worked at Costco and had to go into the cold fridges, it's like, oh, I got to go into the data center.
Yeah, but then it was
start the machine and get out.
Then I remember I spent 8 hours working in a data center that was a hot data center, and that was stifling. That was, oh my God, yeah. We just had to drink loads and loads of water, which isn't good because you're not supposed to be bringing water into your data center. Do I die of dehydration, or do I spill the bottle of water on the data center floor? What was the one thing that I remember with my first, if we go back to to the first usage of SaaS was when I first heard about a software as a service application, and I was reluctant to use it or couldn't understand why people would use it because it would require an internet connection. And I didn't have an internet connection all the time. I didn't have data on my cell phone. I didn't have the ability to tether to my laptop. If I was on the train and I wanted everything, installed on my laptop and available as I was commuting or wherever I was. So, and I remember it must have been, that was in 2003, 2004, 2005. And then from probably 2008 onwards, that changed for me, with the ability to have mobile internet, on your cell phones and dongles becoming available for laptop internet connectivity. What was other people's experience, and do you think that also attributed to your expansion of SaaS application usage and knowledge and awareness?
When you asked the question at the beginning, or when do you remember your first SaaS? In my mind, I never looked at email or file sharing like a SaaS solution. So I remembered the first time it hit me, the benefit of SaaS, when we converted our QuickBook from on-premise to the on version. I mean, our QuickBook server used to just crash all the time. We'll start it and it'll be updating Lotus, the Microsoft things for an hour or two. It was so painful running our accounting system on premise. So I was looking at it. I mean, for email, it was like given, it's there, Yahoo, Gmail, and so on. Even Box for me, it was, this is the way to go. The first time it hit me, the value of a SaaS, when I took a business application that was running on premise that was causing so much pain for us. And when we converted to it, I mean, the benefit, the hassle, supporting server, you just took out all the servers and freedom. That's what I remember. Well, it hit me that it's the way to go for everything going forward.
Yeah, it sounds like it solved, it was solved a big problem, such an easy thing, relatively easy thing to do, but such a significant change solved a very, very real problem with hardware and hardware issues.
Colin, to your point, I think for me, while I hadn't thought about it, but was very aware, and there was a point in time where internet connection, period, was a barrier, I quickly moved beyond that to bandwidth and storage being a problem. So just going from like, okay, well, now I've got internet, I don't really have to worry about it. But then my world quickly became involved with, personally, there was some bandwidth and some storage stuff. That's why I talked about taking advantage of every promo to get free extra Dropbox space, like everything I could, because they're like, you do this and you get free. And I was like, oh yeah, sweet. So just try to get as much as I could for that. But then also just raw bandwidth. And I was at the time for that was in genomic research places. And the laws required by the NIH here in America was all the sequencing that was happening, they wanted all the raw data at the NIH, and they had an FTP server and not a lot of bandwidth to it. And all the data being generated, like the amount of stuff being generated by the place I was at, would take months for just one data set to get uploaded. So they were buying gigantic hard drives, the biggest they could get for like FireWire hard drives, splitting it up over 6 to 8 of those, and then shipping those to the NIH. And then getting them back and doing it just in cycles, because they just didn't matter that we were on a big fat bandwidth as a corporation. It couldn't be done. So those limitations were a problem. And the cloud has definitely since then solved that it's, yes, technology's gone further so that it doesn't even need as large a data set to be transmitted, but now it's just a blink up to the cloud or whatever, and it's taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now, storage is no longer a problem. Nobody worries about SAN storage, and redundancy, buying hard disks, having 24, was it 24/7, 24/7, 4 24/7, or is it 24/7 4? A 4-hour call out 24/7 days of the year on your server infrastructure, to ensure that it carries on running, and then have to wait and pray while your RAID rebuilt itself when you stuck in that new disk, and triple checking that you are removing the failed disk. All of those things are no longer a concern. Interested to hear any other thoughts, stories, opinions.
I remember being on Amtrak going from New York to Boston in, gosh, it must have been 2006, and hotspotting from I think it was like a Palm or something, maybe it was before, something along those lines. And I was able to do my work, which was I was doing some web design for some clients at the time, and I was just on the train, plugged directly into the power on the train. Most productive work I had done in a while. It was great.
Yeah, I love, as a side note, I love working on trains.
And planes.
I'm not so planes. I have problems with elbow room. I always find on trains you have more elbow room, and you don't have to type like this. But yeah, I used to commute in the UK for about 50 minutes on the train, and I used to commute into this building, this virtual building here behind me, for a number of years. And the best work I have ever done has been on the train. I have solved the hardest problems on a train, because I think limited bandwidth. That's when you're tethered to your phone. A limited time is a real motivator for the stuff that's up here to get you thinking and fixing. And I know Dominic travels on the train quite a bit. I'm sure he finds that he does his best work. So, and I know there's a story.
I write my articles here. I write my Tory articles on there. They're the most profitable journeys I ever have.
Yeah. I remember reading a story of an English author. He was working and commuting, and he wrote a book, and then he got a book deal and gave up his job. And the publisher says, "All right, you've got one book, now write another book." And he sat at his desk and he's like, I don't know how to write. Let's get on a train. So he, jumped on a train for like 6 hours, wrote a book, went across the country, came back, wrote the other book, and needed that motion or that environment. Which is very strange. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
interesting.
All right, Caleb's popped back in. Are you in a deli there? I see the clock behind and maybe a menu.
No, it's a co-working space.
Ah,
yeah.
Decor.
Out there in the real world.
Yeah, it's weird, but I love it.
Excellent. Do you have any stories of SaaS usage and your first awareness from a bygone era?
Oh, I hinted at this in Slack, but in my first IT job, I started out literally writing out requests in a notebook to keep track, which translated into like keeping them in like I think it was what's Apple's thing? I'm drawing a blank there. Their word processor. Pages.
Pages, yeah.
Pages doc. I was moved to a Pages doc, and then my boss was like, "Yeah, the company wants us to keep track of all this in this SharePoint site." So we literally were manually entering tickets as we were doing them or after the fact or whatever, and like manually updating the status and whatnot. Like the whole thing was us taking all of the ingress, phone calls, walkouts, emails, whatnot, and manually entering it. And so about a month before I ended up leaving the company, I signed up for a Zendesk trial. I'm like, this is like anything has to be better than what I'm doing. And it was still pretty cheap at the time. I think they had a tier that was like $12 for the year for one person. I was like, I will pay this out of pocket in order to have something.
Zendesk used to be real cheap. It's
Yeah.
not now, though.
No, it's not at all. But I think that was probably my first real introduction outside of consumer space.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing what you can do with SharePoint. I have used SharePoint with a form as a poor man's ticketing system or an incorrect ticketing system.
I mean, this actually it was numbers that I was using, not pages, because I was doing it as a spreadsheet. And realistically, the SharePoint site wasn't any better. If anything, it was clunkier. It was by virtue of the name, it was shared amongst the global team as opposed to just on my desktop.
It's interesting that you mentioned SharePoint because that is a classic and a perfect example of an application that has transitioned from a physical installed, locally hosted, server-based application, that you would probably buy a perpetual license for, to a cloud-based SaaS application that's centrally hosted and you access it through a licensing, through a subscription model.
I got the opposite question recently.
You got what question?
If I can put my Google Share drives on-prem. I'm like, no, please don't.
Everybody's looking stunned and
we've installed Drive file stream on on-prem servers before. It's just real tough. You end up with a lot of resource problems when you do it, but
and you only have 800 gigabytes up and down a day.
Yeah, Ignite still have that as a business model, don't they? They have a cloud-based system and a cloud sync, and you can have a locally hosted.
Too. If you're doing it in a terminal service, there's a drive mapping problem. Every person has to have their own unique letter. Otherwise, they'll step on each other.
Yeah, a lot of these things don't scale.
Yeah. The story about SharePoint though reminded me of we had both like network file shares and SharePoint when I worked at a large telecom, and I was working in retail operations at the time, but I guess this probably was my first migration. I migrated all of our files, all of our like inventory management and operations files from our file share to the SharePoint so that we wouldn't have a versioning problem. Because we were starting to have to like basically you would work on something for the day and then you would have to email it to the person who was going to be there in the morning the next day in order for them to have the most up-to-date version. And so, so that's what we were dealing with in the file share, because we each had our own sort of section of the file share, but there was no shared section. It was just like a place for you to store your things. And then I finally, it took forever to get access to the SharePoint site for our store. But that was like the first migration I ever did, was putting all those files up there and like making sure everybody knew how to access them and like
there's a lot of broken business there is a lot of broken business processes that can be fixed with the good implementation of and the correct implementation of a SaaS-based product. There was a company I was talking to very recently that was using some scripts, and they were having some problems with their large team because different people in the team had different versions in the script. And one person at one team, had made an adjustment for their report, but hadn't shared that script with everybody else. And I'm like, why don't you just put it in some form of Git repository, and then people will always know what is the latest version of the script that you're going to be running. And they're like, oh no, well, yeah, we could do that. We don't know how to do it. We'll just email the script backwards and forwards, when we've updated it. And I was like, no, that's not a process that continue or will scale. You really do need to embrace versioning and have some control over it.
Yeah. I think versioning has been one of probably the more significant contributions of SaaS.
Yeah, and
the ability to access the most up-to-date version anywhere you are immediately after it's updated, or sometimes even as it's being updated.
Yeah, watch it in real time.
Yeah.
I know of a developer who hates Google Docs because they love their Git versions, and I know them, and I know that they literally write documents within Git to have merges work off correctly. I don't fucking know how that's supposed to work properly, but yes, they write documents and documentation and everything in Git, and like contracts too, and I'm like, not gonna happen with me.
No. You got to use the right tool as it was intended.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and it's been great to hear everybody's history, viewpoint, exposure to SaaS, how it has grown and evolved. Obviously, this discussion could go on for hours, and I know it would have if we'd have had a larger group of people who normally being attended. Any final thoughts, Jerry Springer style final thoughts?
A quick share of a most innovative or cool usage of SaaS that you've ever seen? I don't. I got to think about it, but I'm like going like, I wonder what kind of super cool creative stuff we've seen out there, and gone like, now that's how you use SaaS. Anybody got anything?
I know I have one.
Yes,
I know.
Pull it to mind right now.
I know.
It's hard to think of like specific, innovative, creative ones now because it's so ubiquitous. I'm trying to think back.
Everything is SaaS, so it's
yeah.
I remember, so I can tell you like what my first ever, like what I thought was like the coolest, most innovative thing in SaaS that I'd ever seen. And this was back like when I was still a consumer, like right as I was just getting into IT on the help desk side. I had a professor who had made basically like little drop boxes for us in Google Drive for us to submit all of our papers. And she would like post all of our feedback and all of the rubrics in all of our stuff. And I assumed she was using Google Classroom. Like I was like, otherwise, I don't know how you're doing this. But I had never, I didn't have another professor at all the entire time. We had Google for Education. The entire time I was in school, like I never had another professor do this, but it showed me really how powerful Drive could be. That like, I never had to print off a paper for her. I never had to tell her I had submitted something. Like she would just go to the folder, and if it was there, it was there. And if it wasn't, right. And so, and then all she would do is just send us a mass email that's like, hey, everyone, I'm grading your papers now. Like you'll see over the next couple of weeks, like you'll see your grades come in. So just check your folder for this class. And I remember thinking like, wow, like she really invested the time to like learn how all this works and like do it really, really well. So
yeah, I've heard some other great educational usage of Google Workspace for Education or Google Apps G Suite for Education, where the teacher, the professor would own the documents and would share them out to the student. It's like, you've got to write about, I don't know, the Spanish Civil War. Yeah, here's your document. I've shared it with you. Because they own the document and they've given you edit rights to the document, they can see all of the changes that you're doing. So they will be able to see if they give you the document today and the deadline is next week, and you write all of your paper on a Thursday night at 12 o'clock, they can see the whole progression of your paper and when you were doing it. If you were doing it last minute.
Yeah, one of the things that using Drive for school did was like you could no longer kind of like BS your margins and like your line spacing and stuff to try to get to like 7 or 8 pages or whatever your limit was.
Because
all they would do is they would take whatever you submitted and just like highlight the whole thing and switch it back. Like,
my
that's bad for students or bad for
cheaters.
But
why? Page limits. Just use word counts.
Well, no.
Some of my professors use page limits and some of them use word counts.
Word counts, people get around word counts because they'll insert white lettering. So they'll pad it out, and that will be.
I
That
never
will be
even thought of
included.
doing that. I would just
Yeah.
write like the wordiest thing I could, which I'm very good at.
My wife was in education for a long time. She knows all of the tricks, all of them.
See,
So yeah,
doing
That's-
education via Google Docs wouldn't work for me because I put things off so bad that I literally hand wrote a paper in class once.
terrible. A good story about what not to do if you're in education. So, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the last 50 so minutes of discussing SaaS and SaaSOps and our usage. And I will see everybody next time.